Hello there, and welcome to Murder Most British. I'm Zach, the American half.
As you can tell by his accent. I'm Rachel, I'm the Brit.
Hey, I don't speak that much different, do I?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
All right. No,
All right then, mate.
Harry Potter.
Anyway, welcome, guys.
Yeah, I loved going up to the Halloween bash, up to the members club and that, because it was always
Every year,
packed.
yeah, it was brilliant.
It was
Getting all dressed up.
Yeah, it was everybody's dressed, like everybody, even adults and that would dress up, and they'd have big competitions. And
Yeah.
me and Dan won that one year, that last year. That was
Yeah,
pretty
you
good.
did. Best dressed costume, yeah.
I would say that his was better, but yeah.
He had full face and stuff like, but I think it was your little monkey foot that won it for you. That was a good costume.
Well, this one is about Halloween time, and how it turned into a massacre, unfortunately. But I'm excited for this one. I'm writing this one up. I'm like, oh yeah, this is really juicy, good for storytelling purposes, not for what actually happened.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's get into it.
Well, inside the bar, time seemed to stall. The moment Greysteel lost its breath. 1993. Masks, laughter, raffle tickets. Then, through the doorway, two gunmen, a third at the doorway, and a single phrase that turned festivities into horror. Trick or treat. This is the Greysteel Halloween Massacre.
Greysteel sits on the A2 between Derry and Limavady. If I get any Irish things wrong, I'm sorry. Let's just say that right off the bat. Sorry to all the Irish folks. But a ribbon of road that hugs the North Coast fields before meeting Low Foyle. The village lives by the road's rhythm. Commuters in the morning, buses in the blue dark, Friday shoppers drifting home with bread and gossip. Moments here straight, steady, and coastal.
The main street is short and practical. A shop that sells everything. The smell of chips on damp air. A postbox that rattles in the wind. Weeknights felt full quiet early. Weekends linger at threshold, where small conversations build like pallets stacked for winter. Each one familiar, each one known.
The Rising Sun pub sits at the village edge, its sign catching the headlights from the A2. It's Greysteel's pressure valve. Front bar for regulars, lounge for music, snug for talk. People measure time here not by calendars, but by what's on the jukebox, who's behind the counter, and what decorations hang in the window.
Halloween carries weight in this place. It's a communal night, cheap and local. Bin liner capes. I remember those. Stick a bin liner on. There we go. There's your costume. Brilliant.
Here's a sheet with some eye holes cut in it.
Yeah.
You're a ghost now.
Yeah. So bin liner capes, paint from the corner shop, and masks shared between cousins. For a few hours, people get to laugh through disguise. You can be a ghost with the sheet for a night and still be yourself by morning. Same road, same routine.
Well, like most of Northern Ireland in 1993, Greysteel lived in two registers. Normal life above the surface, tension underneath. Locals knew which backroad shaved minutes off of a journey, which turn to avoid after dark, which words kept the peace in mixed company. You learned the rhythm, then the silence that followed it.
Daily life moved to simple timetables. School runs, shifts in Derry, or Limavady. The first and last buses along the A2. Miss one, and you relied on your neighbours to come and get you. It was that kind of place. Favours traded quietly, doors kept half open.
Now, Saturday evenings meant errands finished, clothes laid out, and plans repeated through the hallway. A pressed shirt, a costume checked twice, a coat left near the door because the foil wind always cut later than you thought. Someone shouted back from the step, "Lights off when you're out."
There was a pattern of watching out for one another. A nod from a passing car, a wave from a porch. A quick lift offered without the asking. Shared geography bred short language. You heading down? Aye. Same place, same night.
Yeah, that's about... I'd get messages.
Like, you going down? All right, yeah, jump in.
Yeah. Yep. Going down, bro. Let's go. But by just before 10 o'clock, the Rising Sun's lounge was alive. Tables pushed, 2 empty glasses saving a spot, a DJ threading cables. The mirror behind the bar caught every movement, blurred by fingerprints that mapped the weekend ritual. It was ordinary, warm, a little too bright around the edges.
If you'd passed earlier, you'd have seen costume bags rustle in the wind and a witch's hat refusing to sit straight. Laughter bounced off parked cars, scattering into the hedgerows. Normal sound, normal night.
Up the road, the A2 hummed the same steady tune. Lorry gears, downshifting, van hurrying toward Limavady, headlights slicing through the mist. You could tell the hour by the rhythm alone. Inside the village, time moved differently. Last bus, last call, last track. Doors locked, pockets checked, keys in hand. No omen, no warning. Just Saturday, the 30th of October of 93.
By late October that year, Derry was still a divided city. Its murals and checkpoints remind us that peace was an ambition, not a condition. Villages like Greysteel felt that pressure at the edges. Graffiti one week, whispers of new violence the next. The Rising Sun remained one of the few mixed pubs in the area where Catholic and Protestant regulars still shared the same bar and the same joke.
Halloween 93 fell on a Sunday, but the party came the night before. The Rising Sun's disco was set for Saturday. Fancy dress, raffle, live music. Sounds excellent. People needed the break. That week had carried too many funerals. The Shankill road bombing in Belfast had killed 9, and retaliation was already rumored. Still, in Greysteel, the plan was simple. Dance, drink, and forget. Yeah.
Your kind of night.
Yeah. Just drink and party your worries away.
Yeah.
And with your friends and family and that. Like, that's
Enjoy
what it's all about.
Festivities of Halloween. I love Halloween. Well, the first crowd arrived just after 8. Cars pulling into the gravel lot. Headlights crossing the mist. Someone set off earlier banger. The echo rolled over the rooftops and faded into the fields. Inside, the DJ tested his mic. The crowd cheered automatically.
Oh, yeah, getting ready. But the mood was good. The word comes up again and again in memories from that night. Not wild, not reckless, just good. A small community catching its breath between the larger tragedies of a country still learning how to breathe at all.
Well, by 9, the bar queue was 3 deep. The air smelled of cider and hairspray, of perfume clashing with cheap smoke machines. Laughter carried through the door, and every voice inside belonged to someone known to someone else.
Across the road, the rising sun's light poured onto the tarmac, a single warm rectangle framed by darkness. Beyond it lay fields, silence, and the road that led both ways, back toward Derry, forward toward Limavady.
Inside, the raffle drum spun. Someone shouted for one more song. Nothing strange, nothing ominous, just a Saturday night in a village that believed, for a few hours at least, that peace might hold.
So, like I said, it was the 30th of October of 93, and that night came down cold and clear. By 10 o'clock, the rising sun was thick with sound and body heat, around 70 people-ish inside, laughter colliding with the pulse of dance tracks. The raffle had finished, winners teased, the prizes traded for rounds of drinks, costumes blurred under colored lights, ghosts, cowboys, witches, all shapes of a small-town imagination.
Across the A2, an Opel Kadett slowed to a crawl, its headlights cut. Inside sat Stephen Irwin, Jeffrey Deeney, and Torrens Knight, members of the Ulster Defence Association's North Antrim and Londonderry Brigade. Jackets zipped, gloves pulled tight, their plan were already rehearsed. 1 would drive, 2 would shoot.
The car rolled, engine idling low, metal ticking in the cold. From inside the rising sun came only muffled rhythm, a beat thick enough to drown anything smaller than thunder. No one heard the doors open. No one saw the shapes cross the gravel. The bar's noise wrapped the room in a false sense of security, the kind that exists only until the world changes.
Well, just before 10 p.m, the front door swung inward. Irwin stepped through first, carrying a VZ 58 automatic rifle. Deeney followed, 9mm pistol raised. Both wore masks. Someone by the doorway laughed. Another Halloween act, maybe. A second later, came the words that froze the room. Trick or treat. Then the shooting began.
Bullets tore across the bar, glass turning to powder, lights shattering above the crowd. The first burst pinned half the room in place. The next sent people diving to the floor. The sound was too sudden for meaning, just force, shock, and survival.
Irwin fired in short, controlled bursts, swinging left to right. Deeney's pistol cracked wild, rounds slamming through bottles into walls. In seconds, the mirror behind the bar exploded, spraying shards that caught the disco light like a cruel strobe.
Every heartbeat stretched wide. A woman screamed a name, then vanished under gunfire. Someone hit the lights by instinct. Darkness fell, broken only by the muzzle flashes. The smell of smoke and electrics filled the air. There were no words now, no warning, no shouted cause, just mechanical rhythm, eject, reload, fire. The same 30 seconds repeating until the magazines emptied.
When the last shots faded, the two gunmen turned and walked out on the way they came in. Knight was waiting behind the wheel. The cadet lurched forward, tyres spitting gravel as it vanished east toward Limavady, down the same road that carried every commuter and every ordinary Saturday home.
Inside, silence hushed in behind them. Glass settled, smoke hung thick as breath. Somewhere, songs restarted, skipping in the player until someone pulled the plug. 8 people were dead or mortally wounded. About 19 others were injured. One survivor had stayed still beneath another body, waiting for the noise to stop. The entire attack lasted less than a minute, seconds that hollowed out a village.
No alarms yet, no sirens, only the hum of the A2 returning, the faint rustle of paper skeletons still twisting above the door. At first, the neighbours thought it was fireworks, a Halloween noise, nothing more. And then came the gap, the silence too sudden, too clean. That's what sent them to their doors.
The rising sun's door stood wide, light trembling through smoke. A man stepped inside, froze, and stumbled back out again, shouting for help. Inside, the air was dense with cordite and broken glass. A few survivors had begun to move, slow and uncertain, voices rough from shock.
Those who could still stand tore coats into bandages, pressed hands against wounds, whispered names to test for answers. Others stayed crouched, waiting for the gunman to return. The smell of alcohol and blood mixed in a haze that clung to every breath.
Outside, figures appeared through the dark. Locals wrapped in coats, drawn by instinct more than sound. They gathered on the verge, faces pale in the headlamps of parked cars, each one trying to make sense of what couldn't be shaped into words.
Cars along the A2 slowed and stopped. Drivers ran toward the doorway, headlights cutting through the drifting smoke. In that white glare, the scale of it began to show. The floor was slick, bottles shattered, glass crunching beneath every step.
Someone cried out for a phone. Another asked for blankets. A woman knelt beside a friend and spoke softly, as if volume could pull her back. Someone else muttered the first line of a prayer, and others joined.
Among the dead were couples who had come in for the raffle, friends sharing the last pint of the night, and the barman who'd been behind the counter moments before the first shot. Their names would soon fill front pages where here they were still part of the room, still part of Greysteel.
How crazy. Just go out to have a fun time with your friends and family and whatnot, and then just someone comes in blasting like that. That's just horrific, man.
Oh, on a night out, you wouldn't think anything would happen like this, just some random, basically it's a massacre. Sitting there enjoying yourself. It doesn't seem like they were in there to target specific people. It was just very much
just get in and start blasting and make a statement. No matter how bad that
but
statement
then who knows?
is or whatever.
It could have been somebody in there that they were targeting, but we shall find out.
That's when you would just go, gonna catch them when they come out their door, do a drive-by, or catch them when they're alone or something, and just, do it that way. Why jump in and just murder a bunch of people that are just having a good time? That's just sick.
Very much so.
Yeah, well, that randomness deepened the wound. No pattern, no warning. The bullets had found whoever happened to stand where laughter had been seconds earlier. Those who escaped stumbled into the car park, some barefoot, some blood-streaked, clutching others for balance. They shouted for help into the cold air until their voices broke. A few stared down the road toward Limavady, watching the dark stretch that had swallowed the getaway car.
Minutes passed before the first sirens reached the edge of the village. Their echo rolled low across the fields. Not fast enough, never fast enough. By then, Greysteel had already changed. The rising sun's lights flickered weakly through the haze, reflecting off wet gravel. Inside, the music system sat silent. The mirror behind the bar shattered into a dozen warped images of the same room.
Above the doorway, a paper skeleton still turned slowly on its string, creaking with each draft. Nothing about this place looked like a target. That was what made it unbearable. A mixed crowd in a mixed village, cut down on a night meant for masks and laughter.
And the words shouted before the gunfire, trick or treat. They lingered, longer than the smoke, longer than the silence, etched into the air over Greysteel.
The first responders reached the rising sun minutes after the attack. Their headlights cut through the mist and smoke. The doorway that had framed laughter an hour earlier now stood open to ruin. Inside, the air still held the taste of cordite. Broken glass crunched under boots as torchlight picked out shapes too still to be sleeping.
They began with silence, because anything louder would destroy what remained. Every step, every breath mattered. The lights flickered weakly, reflecting across puddles of spilled drink and blood. Chairs laid overturned, their shadows twisting against the walls. On the floor, empty casings glinted like copper insects.
First task was containment. The A2 was sealed in both directions, its constant hum replaced by idling engines and low, sharp voices. Within an hour, a wide cordon ringed the pub, blue tape trembling in the breeze. Beyond it, villagers gathered in the rain, unwilling to go home, unwilling to look away.
I think that's natural instinct is to kind of want to know what's going on. And I think a lot of anything that happens, people do swarm and see what's happening, try to help people.
But it's bad when you're trying to, drive down the motorway or something and people slow down to look at, their rubbernecking to see a crash or something.
Yeah, that's different. I mean, if you're just standing there, you're not like just creeping like a crawler,
But also there's probably people going, my mom was in there, my sister or my brother or my dad. Are they okay? They're like just trying to get some sort of information. But horrific.
Well, inside, the methodical work began. Cartridges were photographed where they fell, numbered one by one. 2 calibers told the story survivors already knew. Automatic rifle and a 9mm pistol. The gunmen had moved from the door to the bar and back again, leaving nothing but pattern and consequence.
Bullet holes stitched the mirror, pierced plasterboard, and splintered tables where drinks still stood half finished. Every mark carried direction, every fragment angle. Even without the men, their movements could be read geometrically.
Photographs captured everything. The trampled costumes, the raffle tickets turned to pulp, the smudged footprints where survivors had dragged others to safety. There was no frozen clock, no cinematic pause. Just the slow sweep of a camera flashing, mapping the line between chaos and evidence.
Outside, statements began. Survivors sat wrapped in blankets, their faces gray under the floodlights. Some stared straight ahead, others repeated the same words in cycled, short bursts, then silence. The sound of writing was constant. Names, times, guesses.
But by dawn, the rising sun had become a closed scene. Tarpaulins hung over the broken windows, the paper decorations still twisted in the wind, obscene against the daylight. Forensic officers moved with the care of people stepping through memory, gloves tight, markers in hand, cataloguing what the night had left behind.
Each recovered casing, each footprint near the door, each streak of tire tread told a piece of direction. From the road outside, investigators traced a single vehicle pulling away fast toward Limavady. The impression was shallow, pressed into damp gravel, but it held shape enough. A small hatchback, possibly an Opel Kadett.
Within hours, that detail went out to every patrol in the northwest. Somewhere beyond the cordon, 3 men were already vanishing into the fabric of a conflict that had fed them and would now begin to swallow them whole.
By mid-morning, the first aerial photographs arrived. Droneless, of course, from 93. They had to use a helicopter. The rising sun sat like an island of blue plastic and gray smoke, a place defined not by what it contained, but by what it had lost.
Reporters gathered on the A2, their camera cables trailing through puddles. The images travelled fast, bullet-pocked walls, a blood-stained bar. Northern Ireland had seen atrocity before, but this one unsettled even the hardened. A village pub, a mixed crowd, a single phrase before the gunfire.
Detectives from Belfast, Derry, and Coleraine converged on the inquiry. Question was never whether this was loyalist, it was who and how quickly they could be found. Intelligence officers already had a working direction. The UDA's North Antrim and Londonderry Brigade, the same faction responsible for earlier tit-for-tat shootings. The week's talk of revenge had pointed here before the evidence even hardened.
So they obviously had the previous similar situations going on.
Yeah, the Shankill bombings. So that's I've got an episode for that.
Oh, have you? Yeah,
well, not the bombings, but look out for the Shankill butchers. I've got that planned.
That would be coming up at some stage. We'll cover that.
It does kind of give a little bit of context because there was, you had the loyalists and whatever, but like IRA and UDA and the Shankill butchers, they run around do nasty shit, and then the UDA run around do nasty shit, and they just, because it was always
just
back and forth.
Constant sort of like clashing, really.
Yeah, they would, one would do something nasty,
yes,
then they would
the other would retaliate and
yep,
just keep going round in circles,
it seemed like kind of a vicious cycle, really.
Well, house-to-house canvassing began before noon. Along the Limavady Road, officers knocked on every door. Witnesses recalled headlights cutting through the mist, engines revving hard eastbound just after 10. A few mentioned a small car, dark, fast, its lights dimmed. Another remembered something burning later near Eglinton.
That detail matched a report just hours old. A car fire in a rural lane outside Eglinton, nothing left but frame and ash. When forensics arrived, they confirmed what the tire tread had already suggested. It was an Opel Kadett, and its chassis number traced back to a vehicle stolen in Coleraine days earlier. Yeah, they had that planned out.
Well, yeah, they're not going to use their own vehicles. They're going to steal some to do. Not good, not good. Well, inside police headquarters, the board began to fill. There was names, photos, fragments of known affiliations. Ballistics cross-checked the casings from the Greysteel against the weapons recovered in the prior UDA searches. The patterns lined up. 2 guns used before in sectarian shootings across County Londonderry.
Yeah, you got to. Is it Londonderry or is it Derry? That's a big one. They're like, I'm not calling it London.
Yeah,
and that's
we're
just
Irish. We're not English. London is in London.
It's that, but it's like small things like that, that people go against and stuff. You can say, well, they shouldn't have renamed it that. They shouldn't have done that like that. And I can totally understand that. I would want my stuff to be renamed for somewhere else. That's just not cool.
Yeah.
The inquiry's pressure grew by the hour. The attack had struck at the fragile boundary between communities that still tried to coexist. Public anger didn't come in slogans this time. It came in silence. Streets emptied, blinds half-drawn. Even those far from the rising sun knew this had gone beyond politics.
2 men were overheard boasting about a job done and evening the score on the Limavady Road. That whisper reached detectives within a day. Surveillance followed. Phone checks, car traces, quiet interviews that mapped the same circle.
By the second morning, the investigation's focus narrowed to a familiar roster. Stephen Irwin, Jeffrey Deeney, Torrens Knight, and also Brian McNeil, all known in loyalist circles, all linked to the same brigade. Warrants were prepared under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Arrests came at dawn, simultaneous, silent entries in Coleraine and Port Stewart. Doors forced, men taken in under caution. They were separated immediately.
Each denied involvement, but small inconsistencies began to show. Times that didn't align, stories rehearsed but not identical, nerves fraying under the lights. No confession came, but the weight of evidence built its own gravity. Ballistics, vehicle recovery, the overheard boasting, the trail through Eglinton's ashes. It pointed one way only, to a planned loyalist reprisal for the Shankill Road bombing 1 week earlier. Revenge executed without distinction, aimed not at a target, but at a crowd.
So just a little bit of context about the time. In 93, Northern Ireland's policing operated inside a siege. Forensics meant powder and film, not databases. DNA was a theory, not practice. Each warrant demanded military backup. Each interview required security sweeps before it even began. Every move risked retaliation. Investigators worked with one hand on evidence, the other on survival.
The Greysteel inquiry unfolded within that tension. Meticulous but exposed. Each photograph, each witness statement was a small act of defiance against the idea that violence could erase fact.
By dusk, the cordon still stood. Reporters whispered near the tape. Locals crossed themselves when passing. Inside the rising sun, the forensic markers had been lifted, leaving only the stains and outlines behind. The cleanup would wait. For now, Greysteel remained both crime scene and community shrine, a place still holding its breath between shock and reckoning.
I can imagine.
It's still being there, still has the tape, and family members grieving, and that's just beyond words, you know?
Yeah, horrible. Well, when the case reached Belfast Crown Court in the early 1995, the corridors carried a different kind of silence. Less about fear, more about fatigue. Reporters lined the walls, notebooks open, pens already tapping. By then, Northern Ireland had seen too many of these hearings, too many faces behind glass partitions. But this one, it felt different. The Greysteel murders had shocked both sides. A pub on Halloween night, men, women, Protestants and Catholics, all cut down for being together.
Well, in the dock sat Stephen Irwin, Jeffrey Deeney, Torrens Knight, and Brian McNeil. 4 men from the UDA's brigade, charged with 8 counts of murder and multiple counts of attempted murder. Each sat with arms folded, pale under fluorescent light, the weight of a divided country pressing down in the hum of the courtroom's heated vents.
The trial was heard under the diplock system. A single judge, no jury, no public duty of peers. Lord Justice Carswell presided. His role, both judge and jury. The system was meant to protect justice from intimidation, but it lent every decision a lonely gravity. The burden of proof hung in the air, dense and clinical.
Yeah, that seems crazy. Like, it's all up to that one judge. And then also you would think judges, and they're just as exposed as the police and that to retaliation as well. So the UDA people could be like trying to intimidate them or saying, we're going to hurt you if you don't let them off, that type of stuff. So that's a heavy weight on a judicial.
Well, yeah, but I think isn't a judge over here, obviously, a judge is judge and jury in a sense in a magistrate's court. So
yeah, but something like this where you have a conflict.
Oh yeah, full on murders and things like that. I mean, obviously magistrate's court, they only send lesser crimes. No murders go to a magistrate's court. They're all crown courts. Yeah. So for just one person, a judge, on his own, single-handedly having to decide what's what is
especially
pressure.
in a high pressure cooker situation like this. That's rough, man. Well, the prosecution began with methodical rhythm. It wasn't drama, it was dissection. They traced the gunman's path through the night, how the UDA unit met earlier in Coleraine, how a stolen Opel Kadett carried them toward Greysteel, and how it was later found burned out in Eglinton. The night's events unfolded as geometry, not emotion.
Well, each step was supported by ballistics. Investigators matched the VZ-58, I said Z like you. They matched the assault rifle and the 9mm pistol recovered during raids to spent casings, the rising sun. The markings aligned like fingerprints. Forensic officers described the pattern of gunfire, the angles of entry and the distance between bursts. One bullet line crossed a mirror, another pierced a bar stool, another had passed through a jukebox. In the quiet courtroom, the diagrams seemed louder than any testimony.
Then came the witnesses, those who had lived through it. Man, that takes some strength and courage, especially at this time, But some gave evidence behind screens, others in person, each voice trembling with memory. One survivor spoke of the words shouted as the door burst open, "Trick or treat." Another recalled crawling toward the doorway through shattered glass, the smell of gunpowder and beer in the air. These weren't theatrical recollections. They were acts of endurance, and each sentence a step back through the chaos.
The prosecution placed the killings in a larger chain of revenge. Only a week earlier, an IRA bomb on Shankill Road had killed 9 people, including a child. Terrible. That was horrific.
Having kids caught in the crossfire and being collateral like that.
Yeah.
But in their minds, they're like, well, they're on the other side. It don't matter or something like that. That's just sick.
Well, Greysteel, they argued, was loyalist retaliation, a calculated balancing of accounts. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. Maps, photographs and floor plans filled the court's projection screen. The rising sun was reconstructed as lines and angles, bullet arcs, body positions, impact points. It looked less like a bar and more like a wound made visible.
The 4 accused watched in silence. Irwin, identified as one of the gunmen, kept his gaze low. Knight's expression barely shifted. Deeney and McNeil conferred briefly with counsel, their voices muted. The absence of reaction became its own statement, an emotional vacuum that chilled the room more than defiance ever could.
Well, by the end of the 3rd week, the prosecution's narrative was complete. The weapons, the car, the affiliations, the motive. What remained was intent, whether the attack had been ordered from above or fueled by rage disguised as loyalty.
When the prosecution closed, their final line cut through the air like another shot. Quote, "This was not war. It was the deliberate killing of civilians for just being there." Judge paused, letting the words settle before calling adjournment. Outside, Belfast streets glowed with sodium light and fatigue. Inside, the echoes of that statement hung longer than any verdict yet to come.
But when the proceedings resumed, the courtroom atmosphere had changed. The tension was quieter now, but heavier, the kind that builds when everyone already knows what the outcome will be. Lord Justice Carswell listened through the defence's submissions, arguments shaped less around denial and more around distance.
So the defense counsel didn't dispute the weapons, the cars, or the gunfire. They focused instead on hierarchy. The attack, they argued, was not authorized by the UDA leadership, but carried out in a drunken retaliation, a rogue action, one barrister called it, an act outside policy born from chaos, not command. The defendants, he said, had been used, manipulated by older men who wanted blood without their own consequences. That's fucking gross as well. But that's older men using younger men to do the killing. That sounds familiar.
Yeah. Well, the evidence wouldn't bend. Ballistics were absolute. The burned Opel Kadett was traced through stolen car reports. Witnesses placed the accused together in the hours before the massacre. Intelligence files confirmed their membership in the North Antrim and Londonderry Brigade, the same faction already linked to earlier sectarian shootings. Even in a country exhausted by proof, the case was tight.
Witnesses told the court Irwin had boasted afterward that he had, quote, evened the score. Evidence was also given that Knight appeared to joke about the attack in the days that followed. Torrance Knight, who had helped plan the ambush, was seen laughing about it days later. Jeffrey Deeney and Brian McNeil had been the logistics men, drivers, facilitators, steady hands that made the killing possible. These weren't rumors. They were statements, verified and repeated.
Well, midway through the trial, Owen chose to plead guilty. The gesture wasn't remorse. It was inevitable. His plea confirmed what the evidence already spelled out. He was one of the gunmen who fired into the rising sun. The remaining 3 continued to contest the charges, their silence unbroken, even as photographs and forensic models made denial pointless.
When Lord Justice Carswell delivered his verdicts in February of 1995, the courtroom barely moved. Irwin, already guilty by plea, was sentenced first, life imprisonment for 8 counts of murder. Knight, Deeney, and McNeil followed, convicted on the same charges and handed the same fate. Carswell's words were measured. "This was a calculated slaughter of innocent people," he said, "carried out in cold blood and without a shred of humanity." The sound of pens stopped. Even the press bench went still.
That's pretty mad that they got the same fate despite they pled not guilty and the other one did, but they got the same fate. Do you know what I mean?
But they were charged under the terrorism act and that. So because McNeil was the planner, he planned and set it all in motion, and one guy was the driver, 2 gunmen. They're all in it together. So it's like in concert.
Yeah, I get that. But what I mean is, you had that the guy pled guilty, the other 3 didn't, but they got the same sentence in a sense. So it's like, well, surely what's the point you pleading guilty then? You might as well just roll with it.
I think at that point, he's like, it's over. Like,
maybe he just didn't want to go into court anymore. Once he pled his guilty, then he didn't have to just go in there for sentencing.
I think if you're in there all the time, every day, and you can see just all the evidence stacked against you, he just decided, hey, that's it.
Well, in the public gallery, families held photographs, faces that no verdict could return. Some wept quietly, others sat in silence, staring at the men who had turned a village pub into a war zone. It wasn't satisfaction they felt, only a dull certainty that something final had been spoken.
Outside, television crews waited in the cold. The headlines that evening carried a mixture of closure and disbelief. UDA men jailed for Halloween massacre. Belfast, weary with its own grief, barely reacted. The war hadn't stopped. It had just paused long enough to hear its own echo.
Well, for those inside Greysteel, the sentences mattered but felt hollow. Justice, in the legal sense, had been done, but the community understood that done didn't mean over. The rising sun still stood behind the police tape in photographs, its windows boarded, its signs still tilted in the wind.
Back inside court, the guards led the 4 men from the dock, one by one, chains rattling softly against the tile. None looked back. The last to leave was Knight, his expression blank, eyes fixed ahead.
The door closed behind them, and that was it. No applause, no relief, just the echo of footsteps down a corridor that had already seen too many endings.
In the weeks after the convictions, Greysteel began the slow, unspoken work of continuing. The Rising Sun was rebuilt under new ownership the following year. Some wanted it closed forever, others needed it to stay, proof that the village still belonged to itself. When the doors reopened, the name remained. It was an act of defiance, not nostalgia.
Well, each Halloween since, candles have appeared by that doorway. No speeches, no slogans, just light in the same place where darkness once took over. The massacre became one of the defining horrors of the conflict's final decade, an atrocity so senseless that even loyalist figures called it a mistake too far. The 8 who died, 6 Catholics and 2 Protestants, came to symbolise something Northern Ireland had nearly lost, ordinary coexistence.
Okay, so the next part, and we need a little context of the Good Friday Agreement for people, some people that don't understand what it is or what it entailed. So the Good Friday Agreement, signed on the 10th of April, 1998, marked the formal beginning of peace after 3 decades of conflict known as the Troubles. It established a new power-sharing government in Northern Ireland, set up cross-border institutions with the Republic of Ireland, and confirmed that the region's constitutional status would rest on majority consent. It was a treaty built on compromise, guns to be silenced, politics to replace paramilitarism, prisoners to be released early if their organizations held to the ceasefires.
Well, under the Northern Ireland Sentences Act of 1998, anyone convicted of the Troubles-related offences before the agreement and belonging to a group maintaining a ceasefire could apply for early release. Hundreds walked free, some only after 2 years in prison. It was a political act, not a pardon. The conviction stood, but the doors opened.
Well, this is where we're going to get into what some are probably going to get angry with. But for Benny, it was the price of peace. Supporters argued that no lasting settlement could hold while cells still divided the past. Opponents saw betrayal. Families of the murdered watched those responsible return to ordinary life, while their own sentences, grief, memory, and absence had no expiry. The releases were meant to draw a line under history, but in places like Greysteel, the line still felt raw and jagged.
So, when the Good Friday Agreement took effect, its early release provisions reached into every corner of Northern Ireland's history. Among the hundreds freed under its terms were Torrens Knight, Stephen Irwin, Jeffrey Deeney, and Brian McNeill, the men convicted of the Greysteel massacre. By the turn of the millennium, all were out. The law that closed the cells was the same one that had promised a future without war. For many in Greysteel, those two ideas were hard to hold in the same breath.
So that just seems ridiculous to me, in my opinion, that they got sentenced in 95, and by 2000 they were all out. If they murdered and injured a bunch of people, destroyed families, and they're just able to just walk out just because this. Come on.
I mean, it shouldn't have been a part of the agreement to, especially people that have only just been sentenced like that, like, most recent life sentence people. People that have received life sentences, they should not have been part of this agreement, in my view.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's nowhere near the same situation, but like I know I've seen stories in America, like there was a guy that was like, how he was selling weed and that got sent to jail for distributing weed. And then like the next year, weed was legal in California. I think it was in California.
Yeah, but he's not being released, is he?
But he still had to serve out his time because he committed the crime before the law changed. So
exactly.
It was still the law. But
and this is the thing. I think
murder charges didn't fucking change.
No. I think it's absolutely disgusting. And there's no justice then for the families and the friends of these people.
And they get to see him.
Exactly.
See him walking down the street and they're like, that person killed my brother or sister or mom.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and they're just fucking laughing.
Yeah, that is just completely no justice whatsoever.
I mean, they had no remorse because they were laughing about it in the pub later.
There you go.
Well, for the victims' families, that was another blow, obviously. They'd endured the trial, believed in the permanence of justice, only to watch it dissolve into the politics of reconciliation. Quote, "We didn't expect miracles," one relative said later, "but we expected sentences to mean what they said." Fucking right.
I agree with that. At the end of the day, if a judge gives you a 10-year sentence, you shouldn't be getting out on early on no good behaviour, anything like that. Your sentence is your sentence, in my view. You should do 10 years if you're sentenced to 10 years. Knight's release drew national outrage. He emerged defiant, photographed outside prison, unrepentant. In 2008, he was convicted of assault and later had his licence revoked, only to be re-released under the same early release provisions. Irwin, too, returned to the headlines in 2005, jailed again for a knife attack before being freed once more in 2013. Each reappearance reopened wounds in a community still trying to scar over.
For police, Greysteel became a point of study. The scale of the scene and the trauma it left informed later improvements in mass casualty coordination, evidence control, and aftercare for first responders. Procedures for mass casualty management were rewritten: faster cordons, stricter evidence control, and structured aftercare for first responders, which that's just, they're going to see some horrible stuff. And that is amazing that more care for them to help get through that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first responders, police, ambulance, they all see the worst things that happen in society. And, of course, people think, just leave it at the door. There's no way that they can do that. They will take these visions home with them. And, so yeah, aftercare 100% needs to be, top notch for these people.
Yeah. And unfortunately, those lessons that they learn are paid for in blood.
Well, luckily, the community's resilience surfaced quietly. Annual memorial services alternated between church halls and the Rising Sun's forecourt.
Families found their own rhythms of remembrance, birthdays marked privately, anniversaries kept without cameras. One mother told a journalist years later, quote, "You don't move on, you just keep moving." That line became the village's unspoken creed. You just got to keep moving.
I think it's like anything, as bad as some traumas in your lives are, life is a one and only thing. And I think just try and push through, seek help if you need it, and just push through all the traumas. So you're not going to forget things and you're not going to not feel things, but live your life as best you can. That's what these people who had passed away and been murdered would want you to do. And luckily, as a memoriam, the Rising Sun still stands today. The paintwork has changed, the music's softer now, but the heartbeat remains. On Halloween nights, people still gather, careful, respectful, knowing what it costs to celebrate at all.
At midnight, someone usually glances at the clock behind the bar. It ticks properly, time moving forward, the way it should. Well, that was the Greysteel Halloween Massacre. Ooh, that was crazy.
I mean,
I didn't expect that ending.
No.
I was like, doing it up. I was like, you fucking what?
That's a shock for him to come out under this agreement, after serving, 2 years, 3 years, around about a few years?
Yeah, a couple of years.
Nowhere near life, which is what they should have done.
For murdering 8 people, injuring dozens, or what was it, 16, 16 other people.
Yep.
And scarring mentally other people.
Yep.
It wasn't enough. Enough.
No, definitely not. And they obviously went on, a couple of them went on to commit more crimes. Not good.
Yeah, that could have saved other people from violence from those guys. But yeah, it's just terrible. But thankfully, the community's gotten back together and they've got a plaque for the.
Yeah, I'm really glad that they kept
forgetting.
the pub. And, I think having that place to go. I know over in America, when there's sort of murders at some houses, they actually knock them down, don't they? Like if it's quite a horrendous crime.
Oh yeah.
It just.
Well, I think some things you'd be like, nobody's going to want this house after what's happening here.
Of course, but I think for them to have this place to go to feel connected in the sense and use it as a way to
heal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well,
that's a crazy one.
Well, next week we've got a special episode with a special co-host, so we'll get that out to you.
Yeah, we've got a guest host next week, so that would be great.
And then after that, there will be another special episode. I'm going to keep this one under wraps. That's a special one, but if you see the date, you'll probably know what I'm going to be talking about, or we're going to be talking about. Sorry. So
it'll be fun.
Please follow us, and also give us a like, comment, and especially like Apple. If you can put a review or give a 5-star rating or something, it really, really helps. It doesn't take long. Just do a review and just be like, it takes 30 seconds. Be like, this is awesome, or you guys are great, following instructions, whatever. Just give us those awesome reviews if you enjoyed what you heard. And also find us at Murder Most British on Instagram and TikTok, and MMB Podcast on Facebook.
We've also got a link tree for everywhere you can follow us down below. So until next week, stay safe and stay curious.
Bye-bye.